with our virtual programs. So on behalf of Global Ties Alabama, I'd like to welcome our participants, our attendees, our audience, which I know will continue to grow in the next few moments. Just as a reminder, Global Ties Alabama has been in existence in Huntsville since 1965, and for the past 10 years, we have expanded our programming throughout the state of Alabama. We initially helped international military trainees at Redstone Arsenal to feel at home, coordinating multicultural events in the Huntsville area. And now we do that throughout the state for close to 400 visitors a year. COVID-19 has impacted our organization as it has all of our communities. And so we are not hosting face-to-face, in-person delegations right now. We are pretty much virtual programming with our Global Perspective Institute as well as virtual exchanges. I want to appreciate all of you today because we know in our community that we don't just host delegations, but we have a strong history of our citizens who go to other countries to provide services, whatever community services. Some are very specialized, some are general. And this afternoon we have a wonderful panel and moderator who have all personally served across borders. And we're delighted. So I'm going to take this time now to introduce our moderator, Frank Broyles. I never know how to introduce Frank because he is part of the clergy. So I'm going to call him this afternoon, Reverend Frank Broyles. He's a community pastor, but I also know him more recently as a consultant. He's a consultant in personal, community, and leadership development. He is a congregational resource specialist, a community service chaplain, loves to officiate at weddings, and visit as a preacher throughout the country and throughout the world. And I have the distinct honor of being one of his hires. I think he was chair of the board when I joined 10 years ago, International Services Council. So I want to appreciate him for his vote of confidence and support that he provides. He's actively involved in also the diversity and inclusion work for the city of Phil, with a focus on inclusion. And so you'll get to know a little bit more about him this afternoon. There's no way that Frank will participate and you don't learn more about him. So Frank, I'm going to turn it over to you with a great appreciation for joining us and leading the conversation this afternoon.
I'm delighted to moderate our August panel in August. You get it? I love to moderate. It's not my first rodeo moderating. I've had hundreds of experiences moderating and I enjoy doing it, but this one is not hard because you've provided a structure, a theme, a focus, a group of people. I had nothing to do with choosing, thanks be to God. Didn't have to do that. And then even the subject itself and the refinement of the subject, I certainly have helped with that, with the questions that we're going to be looking at today. But Jackie provided us with a tremendous foundation for some really good questions for today. So I'm looking forward to moderating and learning as I share it at the same time. Now, I believe in structure and flow, okay? Structure means you structure things in a certain way, hopefully to achieve the results you need. And so we have a structured time together to address specific questions and to do them in some depth, although we have a limited period of time. But also where we need to flow, which may mean spending more time in some areas than others, involving dialogue and exchange, so the structure can give way to the flow, and we're aiming to have a balance of both. So I'm going to ask each of our panelists to introduce themselves and then to describe in summary what their overseas volunteer service has entailed. Basically, what have they done in the way of volunteer overseas service? And I'm going to let each of them do it in whatever order they choose. So whoever jumps in first gets to go first.
Okay, my name's Deborah. I'll go first.
That's a test, by the way, to see who's going to really start first. Yeah.
I'll get it done first. My name is Deborah Adelsberger. I go by Deb or Deborah. My first experience volunteering overseas was Peace Corps. And I did Peace Corps in Kenya. And then I stayed. My background is geology, so I was able to find water. And drilling for water. After Peace Corps, I stayed in East Africa and worked in conflicts areas. Somalia, I worked the Rwandan genocide from beginning to end, doing the water and sanitation in the refugee camp in Tanzania. And the Congo, and then over in East Asia, Pakistan, Iraq over there, and Kosovo War I worked in. So I did a lot of humanitarian aid work as an engineer, as a water engineer. I worked for various companies like NGOs, International Rescue Committee, CARE International, WHO, the UN, UNHCR. And then my final job was with USAID in Afghanistan. Okay. And that was kind of the end for me, although that I wouldn't consider that volunteer work because it was highly, highly paid. Oh. So I don't know how much that's volunteer work, but for me, it was a huge introduction to the political arena. It was being at that level. It was State Department and USAID. So that's my background. I'm a driller. I drill for water. I like community work. I find that lacking in the US. I got to Huntsville by way of a job for Iraq, and then I bought a house and I'm still here. So I was doing some work for Engineers Without Borders, but we came to an impasse because my feeling was they took a project that was far too far away and too much money had to be spent on overhead. Just getting there. It was down in East Africa, down in Zambia. So I'm not doing that now, but I noticed it was still on my emails. So I have fixed some of that. So I'm glad to be here. Thank you for moderating, Frank. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Frank,
Who wants to go next?
I'll go next.
Charles?
I'll go next because I want to put in a juxtaposition to what Deborah just described in terms of her experience. Mine has not been that at all in terms of having served in those locations outside of the US. So the global experience, the work that I've been doing has been at a distance, if you will. There are members of our team, our Congo projects team of the Presbytery of Shepherds and Lapsley. That's the center part of the state of Alabama. You know, there's a northern Alabama, then south, and we're in the middle part, Shepherds and Lapsley. The folk that are part of our team have been at this since 2004, primarily working to build schools in the Congo, in the Democratic Republic of Congo. And so we built 2 schools, and I can talk about that more as we go, but we've worked with hospitals and with water projects, Deborah, and with sanitary latrines and with tuition for seminaries. All those kinds of things have been a part of the work that we've done. I had wanted to go to the Congo once, and when we could travel, and got sick and couldn't go. And then it was a trip scheduled for this fall that I had put my name on the list, and now we can't go. So I have been unable to make the trip to Congo, although members of our team, and there are about a dozen of us who work at this all the time. Of that dozen, about half have spent time in the Congo, working with our partners there in the Congolese Presbyterian Church in the Kasai in the Democratic Republic of Congo. So that's sort of an introduction. I work and live in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. I retired from work 3 weeks ago, so I'm a brand new retiree. And so I'm trying to figure out how I can keep on being of value to people and especially to children. So worked for the University of Alabama System Office as Chief Academic and Chief Student Affairs Officer for 28 years since 1992. And so my attention has continued to be providing service, and the Congo Schools project that I'm talking about here today is one of my most important pieces of work that I do.
Thank you very much, Charles. Who wants to go next? John?
Yeah, I'm John Hamilton. I'm a retired Lieutenant Colonel, Army, and a retired CEO. I've been retired for 10 years, so congratulations, Charles. I've spent 6 of those years traveling to Haiti. I'm representing the Dr. Jerry Graham Medical Foundation, and we provide medical services and Christian church services to remote populations in Haiti. And if you're familiar with Haiti, it's one of the poorest countries in the world, frequently visited by earthquakes and hurricanes here most recently. And so we go to very remote regions. They often don't have water. They don't have electricity. We provide basic medical. We provide dental. We normally have a dentist with us. We provide pharmacy, which is a major logistical challenge to get medication in. And we provide glasses. We see about 200 to 250 patients every day for 10 days.
Wow.
So it's a very demanding and grueling time. We often sleep in tents. So it's a challenge for us to do it. And I've been 6 times and I've gotten a lot of satisfaction and pleasure out of touching the people.
Thank you, John.
But John, John, what organization are you doing that through?
We're doing it with the Jerry and Charlene Graham Medical Foundation. Jerry's a doctor, retired doctor here in town.
Oh.
He's been doing this for 25 years.
Oh.
And he has a foundation that supports it. We pay to go. We actually pay our own way. But he has a foundation that provides the medication and all the other supplies that we need for the trip.
Good. Thank you. Okay, Roger?
Me now, great, yay. Well, I failed first grade miserably.
Well, we don't need to hear the whole story here now, Roger.
I'm going to give you the whole story. Because of that and my parents' ability to teach me offline, reading has always been an important part of my life. And so when I had an opportunity to go to Uganda 20 years ago and found out that their children were very much like me, they couldn't read. So I said, as a systems engineer, I think I can make some changes and help there. The system engineer doesn't just give books to children, doesn't train the teachers, doesn't just build the schools, doesn't interface with parents. You got to do all of that well and put it together. So that's the direction we headed. And also to focus on one country, and in this case, kind of a limited geographic area, although there's about 1,000 schools in that limited area. And so it wasn't a calling for me, that was part of my life. If you can't read, as I've had long discussions with a lot of Ugandan teachers, even physics teachers that tell me, well, my students don't need to read. I said, you're a reading teacher also. All of us have to read, have to teach reading. And so that's what we're about. I've been fortunate to have a charity of my own, and also working with the Rotary Club of Greater Huntsville. Has been very focused on that. Yes, we build schools, we teach teachers, but the main thing is I go there twice a year for the last 20 years. And now I have children, they're adults that have succeeded. The main thing I focus on when I go there as an engineer is to ask the kids and the teachers, once you learn the mechanics of reading, then how do you put that together? How do you think and how do you plan for the future? So that's what we're talking about, is thinking and planning for the future for these kids. Yeah, very good.
All right, thank you. What an excellent panel, Jackie. Good job. Okay, what we're going to do now is to talk a little bit about the nature and status of volunteer service in other countries. Now, each of us have our own experiences and our own context and background, but what about the nature of volunteer service, how it's changed over the years and what its status is? And of course, the world we live in is changing regularly, and there's tremendous tensions now that do affect the way in which we do community volunteer service. And for this question, I'm not going to ask each person to necessarily respond in order, but just to see who wants to contribute to the response to that question, the nature and the kind of status of volunteer service today. Who wants to speak to that?
I'd like to speak to that real quickly. 20 years ago, when I get on the plane and fly particularly from a European gateway city, there was a lot of well-meaning, religious-based people. They were going there because God called them. They weren't sure what they were going to do. They were hoping God would direct them once they got there. In fact, I was fortunate enough on some of the planes when I was leaving Uganda, some of those same people on the plane, some of them were very discouraged because God didn't tell them what to do.
Wow.
When you look at a society, a third world country, can't you use your own eyes and brains to think this through?
Oh,
What? And so I couldn't do nothing with them. But what I've noticed in the last few years, I see more focused people. I see people with water drilling expertise that know why they're going there and what they're going to do. Because in Uganda, they're suffering now very much from pullback. So many charities and organizations have helped them so many years. Those organizations are pulling out because they said, we've helped you. You know, you're on your own. You need to handle this. So fortunately, there are some very focused people that I see, particularly water. You know,
interesting.
I'm not a water person. I could be. I'm a civil engineer. I believe you've got to have, it's unfortunate, you've got to have an education.
Interesting.
And water.
And that's what I see. Thank you. That might bridge us over to Deb because of the water connection. But Deb, how would you respond to that question about the status and the nature of service today?
Well, I'll speak about what I know, particularly from Peace Corps, and then I'll segue into the NGO and WHO and those agencies. So in Peace Corps in the 60s, it was very technical. You had to have a technical degree. That has shifted over the years. And now, well, before all this, Peace Corps, you had to have a college degree, but they weren't target specific. So there weren't like architects going to teach architecture. It's a much more loose. And then what happened with Peace Corps when all these, when the computers came out, laptops, cell phones. So now Peace Corps is struggling with recidivist people staying. They're leaving early because they get bored. They don't live in the isolation long enough to connect with the community. They're too focused on the phone, their friends, the back home, So they're having a problem with that. Now, the NGOs, now remember, I started that work in 1989. And so what I've seen happen during the NGO experience from IRC, International Rescue Committee, CARE International, Oxfam, several others, part of our job was to train host nationals. So what has occurred in the humanitarian world is that there's a lot of qualified, well-trained host country people. So for Americans and also for the UK and for Europe, those jobs are not as available anymore because the host nationals are now able to do the work. And that's been a really good thing. You know, we used to talk about if a country was in its infancy or its adolescence or it was ready to jump and go on their own. And so, yeah, that's what I can say about that.
Okay.
John? Yeah, I'd like to reinforce what Roger said, but we have a 8 to 12 man team, or men and women, and we have a few teenagers with us every time. But only about 4 of those have medical degrees, you know, there's kind of an assumption that if you go on one of these, and when I first went, I told Dr. Graham, I don't have a medical degree, so I don't think I really should go on this. And he said, well, God will find something for you to do. And I said, well, God's found plenty of things for me to do back here. My time may be better spent here. God found a lot of things for me to do. You don't have to be medically trained to do glasses, or at Purdue Pharmacy, we're not doing prescription drugs, so you can do pharmacy. Organization is a big thing. So I'm being military. I'm involved in organizing. We have to organize our medications every day for each location we go to. We got to get those medications replenished at night when we get back. So there's a lot of organization required. So it's actually used a lot of the skills that I had that I would have never used those skills back here in the States. So you can take a 17-year-old girl or boy and they can do a lot of things, even if it's just hand out water, that's very meaningful to people in a third world country.
So Frank, the work that was started that we continue in Jefferson Lapsley, the presbytery here, actually got started in 1890.
Wow.
1890, when William Shepherd and Samuel Lapsley, William Shepherd, a young preacher who attended school at Stillman College here in Tuscaloosa. It was not called Stillman College then, it was the Tuscaloosa Theological Institute. And Samuel Lapsley, a young white preacher from Selma, Shepherd, a black man, Lapsley, a white man, were commissioned to go to the Congo to begin missionary work. And Shepherd was the first black man from the US to be so commissioned to go do that work. So we stand on the shoulders, the work that we're doing, we are on the shoulders of Shepherds and Lapsley, because Lucy Shepherd was with with William Shepherd, and Mariah Fearing was with them as well. All Alabama connections serving in the Congo. So all of these years forward, we're doing the work that they began back in 1890. And so we're really proud of that. And so the issue of need has continued. It has continued over in different ways. And I was interested, Roger, in your comment about good religious people not knowing what they were going to go do. Well, I suspect that's been a question in many places across the globe, of wondering what the needs are, what the receptivity might be for helping to meet those needs, and then actually offering the services that would indeed meet the needs that folk had. And so while Shepherd and Lapsley may have gone to meet the needs of the spiritual needs of folk in the Congo, at least in part, they served as counselors and preachers and teachers and all of those services that we still are providing through our work in the Congo.
Where in the Congo are you?
We're in the Kasai region.
Okay.
God has been mentioned, calling has been mentioned. Why do people go, and the purpose? So we want to talk for a few minutes about calling, and I know that word means different things to different people, but how would you each, in your own ways, as many of us wish to talk, describe your calling into volunteer service work? And some of you somewhat already addressed that, but I'd like to hear a little bit more about that. And the thing, Roger, you brought up about, he's called me to go, but what do I do? How much of calling is trusting and then acting on the call as the needs emerge and the situation makes it clear? But your own sense of purpose and calling to this work seems to me needs to be a part of it. Who wants to address that?
I will.
Surprise, surprise.
Surprise, yeah. I love talking about this stuff, and there's not a lot of it in Alabama, so I'm thrilled. But mine, I don't know if it's a calling. For me, God's plan is to do the footwork and just, keep showing up. But what happened for me was I was doing my senior thesis in Tanzania. I was 38, I think, at the time. I did Peace Corps when I was 40. I was struggling with the professor. And we got to the border of Tanzania and Kenya, and he went in to do the visa requirements and stuff. And I stayed in the vehicle and I just started crying. And I was miserable with this professor because he was really being difficult with me. And these two Maasai women came up, you know, they were selling their wares at the borders. And they came up to sell me their wares, but the minute they saw I was distressed and tears were coming down my face, they put their wares down and started wiping my tears, rubbing my arm, going, no, no, no. And I mean, I was like, oh my God, where is this kindness? This is, you know, it's so missing in America. And so that was, I had to go back. And so I came back, finished my degree in geology, and then went back, and it had to be God's calling because it was like an escalator belt. It was just everything, every country. It was like for 20 years, my life was just not mine. I was on some kind of a path. And every time I think that God has left my life, I realize that no, I'm just doing the service work. Doing service work is what keeps me coming back to myself and people. So that's how I got involved in it.
Thank you. Who else wants to share on that question?
I think I got involved, this is Charles, I got involved probably 10 years ago or so now with the work that we're doing, and the team that is there has been there since 2004, as I indicated. So I joined the team, and I think part of it was out of my interest in determining or helping to decide from where my family came, and thus where I came. And what I discovered is that western part of Africa, Ivory Coast and Ghana and the Congo, and that part is where my ancestry was found, much of it. And so I think it was trying to discover me as one way of thinking about it. And then when I started to see pictures of people from those parts of the world, places that I had not actually traveled to at that time, but they represented me, and they represented folk that I could see in me and my family. And our staff person, Jackie, has a picture or so. Could I ask her to put up one of those real quickly? So when I started to see people, when I started especially to see children, and saw that these could be little boys and girls in South Alabama, Middle Alabama, Northern Alabama, with the looks on their faces with what I thought their futures could be with the help that was being provided, and I could assist with that. It just, you know, kind of tugged at my heart. I'm not sure it's a calling, but it became important to me. And you see a white person back in the back part of that picture there. That's Belinda. She's our head leader, and she is still our head leader. She's been to the Congo, you can see there. Quickly go to the other pictures. And so we do medicine, we help the hospitals, we help with children, babies, we help with medical supplies, we help with water resources, electrical resources. Is there another picture? And so all of these represent the kinds of things that we've been doing, helping out in the Congo. And so call it a calling, if you will, but it truly was part of what drew me to the work.
Thank you.
And that's one of the schools that we built, one of the structures. And I failed to get one of the thatch roof, mud floor buildings, that buildings in quotation marks, that this one replaced. But we've built 2 of those. There's a national organization that has built 9. Our presbytery has built 7. Our presbytery has built 2. And I'm really proud of that. And we're looking to help build others as well. Thank you, and I'll stop at that point.
Appreciate that very much. Who's next on the subject of calling to purpose?
I will, Roger. I think after you've been particularly in a particular geography of the world, like I said, we just stayed in Uganda. I think not your calling, but your feelings about and your focus on what you want to do and what you should do are certainly are altered from time to time as to how the indigenous population views you and views your charity and views your work. Like I said, we went there for reading. We shipped tons and tons of books there every other year. And that continues to be our focus, and that's our calling. But what we've realized, and we don't even talk to the very many Ugandans about it, is that country is one of the top 3 countries in population expansion. Their population is exploding so quickly, the government cannot deal with the needs for educating their people. So if you can't do that, then what are the things that can the government not do? What we've discovered, though, to our surprise, I think, and I talked to many of our girls, we sponsor normally girls, is that the longer you keep a girl in school, the smaller her family is eventually going to be. Most of these girls from rural areas, their mothers have between 7 and 10 children that they find very difficult to feed and almost impossible to educate. So we found that just by keeping these girls in school, it's reducing that small microcosm of population. And we see a lot of benefit in that. We don't push family planning or birth control. It's just a factor that we're so proud of that we have been talking to some of the older girls, and they understand what's going on. And they said, yeah, I want to have my education before I have my family. So we're seeing our impact really changing from reading to doing something about the population. There you go.
Thank you, John.
Yeah, I'm going to hang on the word calls.
Okay.
I was called by a senior citizen in my church who said, John, you need to go with us. She had all 3 of her granddaughters to Haiti. And we struggle all the time to get 12 people who wanted to go to Haiti and live in a tent and work 12 hours a day in the heat. We all, but once you go, you're touched by it, and then you feel the need to call somebody else. And one of the things about international service is that we all need to be callers. We need to be looking for that person that can be encouraged to go on the next trip. And we're struggling now that Dr. Graham's 75 and can't go himself to find doctors that want to go. You don't have many doctors that want to spend 10 days in Haiti. And there are a lot of diseases there you don't have in the United States. So if nothing else, they can see what a global disease looks like. But there are a lot of challenges calling people.
Yes. Thank you.
Frank,
Next, go ahead, Jack.
Frank, would you mind if I just piggyback on what John just stated?
Please do.
Even though Roger had his cat, I want to show you my adopted daughter, Bridget, in the Uganda project. Roger is
Yes.
a caller. Roger called the Greater Huntsville Rotary Club to join him. And he's made it seem kind of casual. Oh, we have these girls. Roger, maybe you could be more specific about the numbers and what you have led among the Rotary Club and others to ensure that Bridget has a more productive future.
Please, Roger.
Yes, thank you. One of the things I noticed, even though we were delivering books and building schools, it doesn't seem like you're making that personal connection well enough. And you see young children that you know with just a little bit of help, they're going to really blossom. And also in Uganda, because of the culture, girls are very subservient. And we know that a country to expand and grow has got to have the females grow and expand also. So I went back to our group, and we have, for the last 7 years now, sponsored 53 girls to attend high school. 12 of them just graduated from high school. 12 of them are going on to college with our help also. But also we're picking up younger and younger children, because we found the younger you get a child and help them a bit the better they're going to be off. And so it's just amazing with everybody that you know how a child develops so quickly. But when you see a child like this from a rural area with absolutely no hope at all of ever going to school, everybody's supportive all of a sudden. And so it's interesting, for instance, Bridget is now in 6th grade, and she is an amazing singer. She leads church service, just blossomed. And she came to me many years ago. Her mother came to me and handed her to me and said, would you raise my child? Because she knew that we would help. Bridget was deathly sick with malaria. So for 3 days, I held her and we gave medicine to her, and of course she survived. So we see that almost in every girl we touch. It's just amazing. I have one girl, Bridget, and I'm sorry, that has graduated from high school. She wants to be a civil engineer. She came from a mud hut. So yeah, that's what we're doing.
Thank you, Jack. I appreciate that specificity where we're getting to actual numbers and what has actually happened, which leads me to the next, actually 2 questions in one, as we think more specifically about moments in your volunteer service work where you saw a breakthrough of understanding or an impact experienced. A specific time that you can go to where you saw in this work some kind of a breakthrough of understanding or a unfolding of an impact that can illustrate the power of this kind of work.
So this is Charles. I think this responds to your question. So when we raise money through our churches in the Presbytery, and in order to do that, we have to go out and meet with sessions and meet with that's the governing bodies for our churches, and meet with groups and organizations within churches. And one of the things that we learned early was if we took video, if we took pictures of children, what a difference it made. Roger was talking about resources, gathering resources somewhat in his comments, and it has been wonderful to see the impact of little boys and little girls sitting on the floor in the mud under a thatched roof, and then see what could be if those folk contributed to the work. And so one of the bright lights that has come on for me when I've gone out and met with church groups has been to see the lights come on in the eyes and in the hearts of people that we were asking for support to do better for the children, for the people of the Congo.
Eyes and hearts.
Yes.
Powerful combination. Yes, John.
I'll share one I've shared with my church. We had a very hard trip coming up, and we had very seasoned team, but we had one teenager who was 17 named Hannah from Grissom High School. And I thought it was a really bad idea for her to go. She had never been overseas. Her mother told me to watch after her. I found out that young ladies have a mind of their own. She didn't care what John had. So, but we went into this remote village, and I saw this guy that had no lower body. He had a plank attached to his lower body with strings, and he had ropes around his hands, and he moved himself by pressing down and sliding himself forward. I don't know whether he was born that way or how he ended up that way, but I thought, I hope this person doesn't come to our clinic today, because he's going to be very disappointed. We don't have the kind of medical help that he's probably going to need. And so Hannah and I'm the organizer, so we were handling all the patients, and it was the big long line. And I looked out and I saw this guy in the line, and I thought, oh no. So I went back and started working again. I looked over my shoulder a few minutes later, and Hannah grabbed 2 people, took them out there, picked this guy up, brought him in, and set him in a chair, and got him her water. She gave him her water, and then she went over to the eye clinic because he wanted glasses, and she got him a pair of, had him come over and give this guy a pair of glasses. And when we left, he was sitting outside, and all the kids were standing around, and he was showing his new glasses to all these kids that he was so happy with. But I remind my church when I tell the story that I've been teaching Sunday school for 50 years, and Hannah taught me more in that one incident about love than I had. I got a true understanding of it through Hannah. She really touched my life with that.
Wow, thank you. Powerful. Who else wants to share?
Jackie mentioned Rotary earlier, Jackie, and the experience that you all have had at Rotary up there. The good news today is we learned it just before I started this webinar, Rotary Club meeting. It was announced today that wild polio in Africa has been eradicated. Announced today.
Wow.
Announced today by Rotary International. It is gone from Africa.
Right.
Only Pakistan and Afghanistan still have vestiges of polio, but
Wow.
Africa is done. That's wonderful, good news.
Fresh news on the global scene. Wow.
Frank, I'd like to add one other thing. I can't top that statistic. However, I remember one of our audience members, Mary Grace Evans, was the president of Rotary, and because of Global Ties, I don't know if we were IFC at the time, we decided that we were going to have a morning Skype with our girls in Uganda. Roger was there. We had this early morning, I think it was 7 o'clock morning.
Wow.
All of the Rotary members showed up, and Roger was able to tell us that the girls seemed to be slow getting to the meeting. Now they had to drive, I think they had to travel a couple of hours to get there, but when they got to the embassy that hosted the meeting, they all wanted to use the restroom. None of them had seen running water or toilets like they saw in the embassy. And they just wanted to stay in there and experience it. And that helped us as members to know the impact that our involvement had on their lives, introducing them to something as basic as we take for granted, running water and toilets.
Am I not looking
let me tell you,
am I not looking at Mary Grace Evans? Is she not here?
Yes, she's there.
She's right there. I'm looking at her.
Mary Grace, you there?
Yeah.
Oh, let me add one more tidbit to that. So this 2 years ago, when we opened Walter School for some of our primary children, we had built a 2-story dormitory, unheard of for a primary school. We had several accidents. Girls were falling down the stairs. And when I got there, I said, what is going on? The head teacher said, well, none of these girls have ever seen a multi-story building. These were 10, 12-year-old girls, had never seen steps. Imagine.
Wow. Oh, goodness. Deb, did you want to say something about this breakthrough question, this impact that you've seen?
Yeah, the thing is I think you're looking for the impact that the work has on the community. And what I discovered in my 20 years is that the impact was always on me. It changed me more than I think I brought to communities, although I did bring water and sanitation and
Pretty basic.
yeah, but the bottom line, things like when you're talking about the girls' education, when I worked in Pakistan in the earthquake, we had a camp of about 20,000 people, and UNICEF had brought in schools. They do a school in the box thing, and for 3 months, the little girls got to go to school. And when the Pakistani government shut down the camp, everybody had to go home. And I mean, these little girls were so sad because they knew that was the end. They were never going to go to school again. And and it was really heartbreaking to see that. And the other thing that perseverance is something that I learned, the importance of really listening and really listening. I'm not listening with an agenda, really listening because I don't know, you know. And the other thing that I wrote down was the missionary work. Because I was in humanitarian aid, I saw a lot of early damage in the rural communities done by missionary work. Things like schools, the missionaries would give the school books and stuff as long as the school taught the children to pray to Jesus. And so the communities had this kind of, they kept their own culture going, but they had to do this, pray to Jesus, in order to get the supplies.
Oh.
So that kind of really turned me off. But I have to say this, now that I've lived in Huntsville, in Alabama for a while, I see, I don't know if it's so much tending the spiritual part of a human being, but anything to help, anything. If it's books, schools, I don't care anymore. Just help, do something, make it better, and so now I don't care anymore, but anyway, that's my practice.
Yeah, good. Yeah.
Oh, one thing we've noticed a change, I'm sorry,
That's okay. Go ahead.
within Rotary is that over the years in Uganda, I've seen some failed Rotary projects. I've seen a solar cooker, very nice instrument, sitting out behind a high school, not being used.
Yes.
I've seen a tractor sitting out in the field, rusting away. So fortunately, I do grants. I write grants partly, my profession for the government and for Rotary. And so lately, this last 2 years, Rotary International has really come hard down. You must have a very, very thorough, validated community needs assessment.
That's right.
It's got to be really, really supported by the community leaders, by the politicians even, before we even start investing money. So
Well, and I coordinated mission exchange programs with South Africa and North Alabama Presbytery for about 8 years. And what we learned about the third trip there was what you said, the infrastructure and the care needs to be in place when you invest in those ministries. There were brick making machines all over that part of South Africa sitting in the backyard unused because no one had been trained to do it. Now, we were a part of an effort to change that, and that's good, but someone had not really looked into the context to be sure that the work could continue on with the people there.
That was part of, I did my master's work in the UK for watershed work, and primarily because the UK, they used to own most of the world, so they knew how to do development work. So I did my master's there, and what I worked on was technology and management for rural development, and particularly supply chain for what you put into a foreign country, that the local people have a supply chain that they can replace parts for. And in terms of community involvement, there's several different mechanisms. One is called the rapid rural assessment that you go in and you do, and you determine the needs. But if you don't have the community on board, you might as well leave, because it just
That's right.
it doesn't work.
Let me just say, my clock says it's 1:33, but it's not. I changed my clock to move it up 15 minutes earlier because I don't want this to end, Jackie. I'm sorry.
Me neither.
But I guess we do need to be aware that we're close to running out of time. So I do have one final question. We'll just take a few minutes of this one. Is that okay, Jackie?
Absolutely.
Okay. And that has to do, and Jackie, you phrased this one, I think, how have you influenced people in Alabama or in your world with what you've done through volunteer service? How have you brought that back to home to influence others? And, John, you were talking about spread the call, tell others about this to help them become involved. So who wants to speak to how we've influenced others in Alabama or in our own circles to be involved? And that'll be our final question.
Storytelling is a really important part of what we do. We tell the stories of the experiences that we've had and the experiences that others have had as well. We are talking about the global scene and how we've helped globally, but I can remember just the story of when I first came to Tuscaloosa, Alabama in 1992. Michael and Kevin were 6 and 7-year-olds who lived on the west side of Tuscaloosa that had never seen the Black Warrior River. The story that I guess it was, Roger telling about not seeing a 2-story building. tell those stories, whether they're stories of our children and families here, or children and families other places, not to make people guilty, to incite them to want to do something in spite of their, perhaps, their inability to know where the needs are. And so not to make them feel guilty, but to make them feel guilty anyway.
A call guilty that leads to a call to action. Thank you
But
for that.
I think you can make people feel a part of what you're doing by not turning down anything, like the lady was saying. If they want to give $50, if they want to give a piano, if they want to give a book, an old textbook for their husband, go ahead and accept it. It may not be exactly all the time what you need for your charity or your effort, but through that, you start seeing a networking happen. And so that's been very helpful in Rotary. Many times I don't have to say anything. Jackie or Mary Grace Evans will say, go over there and talk to Roger. He's talk to him, network with him. And so even though a lot of people know us at Rotary and me as only a book monger, we have been so successful that all of Huntsville City School, Salvation Army, just on and on, Randolph School, individuals contribute books. So networking and just being open to somebody helping you, I think, is a big key.
Very good. John and Deb, do you want to wrap up?
Yeah, I'll be real quick, but you know, to get people on the ground, you need to start them here in the States involved in some manner. And so we have church members and volunteers from the community that start pre-packaging this medication months ahead of time. It takes us 6 months to pack all the medication, have it packed properly for every site. We collect glasses, and somebody has to get the prescription off every one of those sets of glasses. So when we get there, we don't have to do that. So there's a lot of pre-preparation work required, and people that get involved in that tend to start feeling they're part of the team, and the next thing you know, they want to be on the ground and actually hand those glasses out. So that's kind of the way we pushed it to get more people involved.
Very good. Deb, you want to conclude?
Sure. What you're asking is also the third goal of Peace Corps, which is to bring back what you've learned there about the culture, and you bring it back home. And for me, what I brought home from all of it was kindness. It's in every culture. I just think we're missing it in the US sometimes. And even in Pakistan, we were taking a break and we went and sat on the rocks along the Indus River, and someone from way up the mountain sent down a whole big plate of food to us. They didn't know us. They didn't, and it just, the kindness in the world is what I brought back. And there's not a lot of people in Alabama that understand the work I did, because it wasn't missionary work. That's the first thing they say, oh, you're a missionary. And no, it was not. I had to earn an income. So, bringing it back. But my whole house is full of pictures of all my friends from overseas. And so I just, through stories, like Dr. Nash said, stories, it's where the information is. That's all.
The narrative combined with the pictures. I think the visual combined with powerful stories is incredible. And
here, I'll show you.
Including the visual as much as you can, because there's nothing like the picture that makes 1,000 words.
See, there's all my pictures from all my friends overseas.
Wow.
Yeah. Anyway.
All right.
Frank, could I end with just one last word? And the word is
yes, sir, preacher. Preacher, go for it, preacher. Go for it.
Gratitude. Deb talked about what we bring back from our experiences helping others, and it is gratitude. Their expression of gratitude, their thankfulness of what we do, it just flows all of the time back to us.
Yeah. Wow, beautiful. I think that concludes our time together. Jackie.
No.
Again, I'm not in charge of the time. I'd give another 15 minutes, but we do need to honor our schedule. And I want to let's everybody give each other and everyone else a round of applause for what we've shared. Shall we do that?
Frank, thank you so much, and to the panel, and certainly to our audience. We're so thankful for everyone's involvement. Obviously, these are heart-wrenching experiences, and these are Alabamians who have experienced what has been shared today. So I'm very thankful and invite you to join us next week. We have an unusual topic. Diplomacy in national parks, and you'll see the flyer. Christine Del Bello is a Foreign Service officer, and she contacted our program officer, Annette Philpo, and said, I'd like to chat with your organization because I have been able to practice diplomacy because of our national parks. So please join us next Tuesday. We're in for a surprise. We have these natural resources and try to understand how diplomacy in national parks is practiced. And then we're going to have Serving Across Borders Part 2 on September 8th. So please continue to join our GPIs. Please share the information with others. And again, have a wonderful day.
Thank you. Thanks to everyone.
Thank you, everybody.